The room went silent the moment I walked in, and I knew at once that something was wrong. It wasn't the kind of silence that comes from respect or anticipation. It was the kind that carried hidden laughter, the kind that sits on people's lips while they wait for humiliation to unfold. I stood at the entrance of the little Italian restaurant, one hand still on the door, scanning the faces of my colleagues gathered around the long table in the back. My friend Oliver gave me a crooked grin and raised his glass. "There he is," he called. "The man of the hour." A few chuckles circled the table. For weeks, the people at my office had been pestering me about being single. At 29, I was apparently some sort of puzzle to them. Most of the men I worked with were married, and the women treated my bachelorhood like a charity case needing urgent intervention. So when Oliver announced they'd arranged a blind date for me as part of our Friday social, I'd reluctantly agreed. "Come on, Nate," he'd said. "Trust us. She's lovely." Now, standing there in my best navy blazer, I realized from their expressions that this had never been about helping me meet someone. It was entertainment. Then I saw her. She was sitting alone at the far end of the table, partially hidden behind a decorative plant. She wore a pale green dress and held her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her dark blonde hair fell softly over her shoulders, and though her face was beautiful, clear blue eyes, kind features, a shy smile, it was obvious why my coworkers thought this was funny. She was large. Not simply curvy, but heavily overweight, enough that cruel people would notice before anything else. And the look in her eyes told me everything. She knew. She knew exactly what this was. Her smile was trembling at the edges, the kind people wear when they're bracing for impact. For one suspended second, the whole room waited to see my reaction. I saw Oliver trying not to smirk. Across from him, Amelia from accounting lifted her phone slightly, probably hoping to record whatever happened next. Others exchanged glances full of anticipation. They expected discomfort. Rejection. Maybe a joke. They expected me to look disappointed. Instead, I smiled. Not the forced kind. A real one. I walked straight past everyone else and stopped beside her chair. "You must be my date," I said warmly, offering my hand. "I'm Nate." Her eyes widened. Then, cautiously, she placed her hand in mine. "Clara," she said softly. "It's really nice to meet you, Clara." And then, because it felt natural, I pulled out the chair beside hers and sat down like there was nowhere else in the world I'd rather be. The room changed. The smugness evaporated so fast it was almost visible. Conversations faltered. Smiles dropped. Oliver looked genuinely confused. But Clara was looking at me as though I'd just rewritten reality. I turned to her. "Have you ordered anything yet?" She blinked. "No." "Well," I said, opening the menu, "that's excellent timing because I'm terrible at choosing pasta and desperately need expert advice." A tiny laugh escaped her before she could stop it. And that was the beginning. At first, Clara spoke carefully, as if testing whether I was sincere. I understood why. People like my colleagues had probably taught her caution. But little by little, she relaxed. She told me she was a children's librarian at St. Martin's Community Library. She loved old novels, rescue dogs, and baking complicated cakes she pretended were accidental experiments whenever they turned out well. I told her about my work as an architect and my hopeless addiction to buying houseplants I inevitably forgot to water. That made her laugh again. And her laugh was wonderful. Not polished or delicate, but real and bright and entirely contagious. By dessert, I'd stopped noticing anyone else at the table. I only noticed Clara. The way she tilted her head when listening. The way her hands moved when she got excited about a story. The intelligence in her observations. The gentle humor woven into everything she said. She was thoughtful and funny and quietly brilliant. And she had spent the first 20 minutes expecting me to humiliate her. That thought sat heavily in my chest. At one point, Clara excused herself to the ladies' room. The moment she disappeared, Oliver leaned across the table. "Mate," he whispered, grinning again, "you deserve an Oscar." The other snickered. I stared at him. "What?" "For keeping a straight face. Honestly, we thought you'd crack by now." The words landed like something rotten. My stomach turned. Around the table, people waited for me to laugh along. Instead, I set down my fork. "You think this is funny?" Oliver frowned. "Relax. It's just a joke." "No," I said quietly. "A joke is funny." The air sharpened. I looked around the table at every face. "You invited a kind, intelligent woman here under false pretenses so you could watch her get embarrassed. That's not humor. That's cruelty dressed up as entertainment for people too cowardly to admit what they are." No one moved. Amelia lowered her phone. Oliver scoffed. "Come off it, Nate." I stood. And then I said the thing that left the room in tears. Not because I shouted. Not because I tried to humiliate anyone. But because I spoke plainly. "When I was 14, I said, my mother gained a lot of weight during cancer treatment." The room stilled. She lost her hair. Her body changed. And people stared at her everywhere we went. Some pretended not to notice. Others whispered. A few laughed. I swallowed hard. She used to be vibrant. Confident. She lit up every room she entered. But little by little, shame stole that from her, not because she changed, but because people decided her worth had changed. No one interrupted. I looked at Oliver. She died when I was 16. And one of the last things she ever said to me was this: "Nathan, promise me you'll never let shallow people teach you how to measure human value." The silence deepened. I made that promise. And tonight, all of you broke something human for sport. Across the table, Amelia began crying first. Quietly at first, then openly. She wiped her eyes and looked down. Others followed, small, ashamed tears, the kind people cry when truth strips away their excuses. Even Oliver looked shaken. I sat back down before Clara returned. When she did, she noticed immediately that something had changed. But she said nothing. Neither did I. Instead, I smiled and asked, "Now, where were we?" "You were about to explain why lemon drizzle cake is superior to chocolate fudge." And she laughed again. That laugh carried us through the rest of the evening. When dinner ended, I walked her to her car beneath the warm glow of street lamps. She hesitated beside the driver's door. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "Do what?" She looked down. "Pretend." The word hurt more than I expected. So I answered carefully. "Clara, may I tell you something honestly?" She nodded. "I forgot everyone else was there." Her eyes lifted to mine. "I spent tonight talking to someone thoughtful, funny, and extraordinary. If anyone was pretending, it was the people who thought this was a joke." Her breath caught. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she smiled, a real smile this time, free of fear. "I'd like to see you again, Nate." My own grin came easily. "I was hoping you'd say that." So we had coffee the next weekend. Then a walk through Hyde Park the weekend after. Then dinner at a little Greek place she loved. Weeks became months. The more I knew Clara, the more remarkable she became. She volunteered teaching literacy classes to adults who'd never learned to read properly. She remembered the names of every child who visited her library. She carried extra dog treats in her handbag in case she passed nervous pets needing encouragement. She noticed beauty everywhere. And slowly, she began to see it in herself too. Not because I convinced her. Because she allowed herself to believe what had always been true, that her worth had never depended on shrinking to fit someone else's comfort. A year later, I proposed in the library after closing time. I hid the ring inside a copy of Pride and Prejudice because she'd once told me it was the first book that made her believe love could be both gentle and fierce. When she opened it and saw the box, she burst into tears. Happy ones. And through her laughter and crying, she said yes. Our wedding was small and full of warmth. Some old coworkers attended, including Oliver. He approached me afterward, older somehow, his confidence softened. I've wanted to apologize for years, he said. I studied him for a moment, then nodded. People can change. He glanced across the room where Clara was laughing with guests. She changed all of us, you know. I looked at her and smiled. No, I said quietly. She revealed who we already were. Later that evening, Clara and I slipped outside for air. The stars stretched bright above us. She leaned against me and whispered, "Do you ever think about that first night?" Sometimes. And? I kissed the top of her head. I think it was the best setup anyone ever pulled. She laughed that glorious laugh. And standing there beneath a sky wide enough for every second chance, I realized something simple and sacred. The world often teaches us to notice surfaces first, to judge quickly, to measure people by appearances that tell us almost nothing. But love, real love, asks more of us. It asks us to see. To look beyond what is obvious and discover what is true. And when we do, we often find that the people the world overlooked are carrying the very light we've been searching for all along.